And with us now is Michele Oricoli, our manners and etiquette expert. Michele, good to have you in the program.
Thanks for having me, Dennis.
So tell me a little bit about your background.
Well, I started in etiquette basically because of my parents. They raised 7 children, and they provided a framework of manners and etiquette. And through that framework, I realized that it was imperative in order to meet people and have any interactions. So after I started working, I then also realized that it was really important as a professional. And soon after that, I started to raise my own children, and I thought this is something that I would like to do. I would like to teach other people, and I just became passionate about it. It's been a love of mine since.
So I went to an all-boys Catholic high school, and during our sex ed class one year, they had a manners segment as part of it, which was interesting. And we learned how to write thank you letters and how to open the doors for women. And the only place where you go in first is an elevator to make sure the elevator is safe and things like that. So it was fascinating. But does it seem to you that manners and etiquette are sort of on the decline in today's society?
I think people have that, I think they have that opinion, but I also think that if you look for good manners, you'll find that also. I think with technology, there has been some challenges regarding etiquette in terms of just being respectful of other people and places, but I'd like to think that that etiquette is still alive and well.
So this is the definitive guide on manners and etiquette and tipping. And we're going to get to tipping in a moment because that's a hot topic as well. But so in terms of thank you notes, let's say you get a gift. Should you send a thank you note, or is an email or a text okay?
The thank you note is the gold standard, a handwritten thank you, and it's a nice gesture. I know when I receive thank you notes, I keep them. I like to see the person's handwriting. It's like a little gift back to me. Kids today, a lot of them don't write thank yous, or they don't want to, but there's ways around that too. There are little cards you can buy them with fill in the blanks, so you can help them develop that skill. And then you can also, I've had some students that are very creative in sending thank you videos and collages. Right, so you always have to say thank you when given a gift and show gratitude for that. It's a really important thing to teach children. But yes, it might come in different ways, but it's always necessary to have that attitude of gratitude.
So it's acceptable to do an email or a text, you think, in today's day and age?
You can do an email or a text. If some people don't want to, get the thank you note, go to the post office, buy the stamp, if that's going to keep you from sending a thank you, then yes, then send either a very warm and thoughtful text. Thank you for the gift is not enough.
Yeah, especially because so many invitations now are coming via an email.
Absolutely.
Evite and the other websites that they have. I want to talk a little bit about tipping because I get asked this a lot of times, and I see it out in public as well. So when I was younger, I worked as a busboy and a bartender, waiter, so we relied on tips because the minimum wage is a little bit lower. But now we're going to places where you're asking to tip at a store in some cases. So what is the etiquette? Let's say I went to a bakery a couple of weeks ago, and they flipped the thing around.
Yes.
And it said the minimum was 18%, and they basically put a pie in a box. Should you tip for something like that?
Typically, counter servers are being paid minimum wage. So it's not required, but it's a nice gesture if they go out of their way, or maybe they remember your order, or they just make your experience a little bit nicer. Then you can, give them a tip. But it's not required in those cases. Yes, in a restaurant, for your busser, your server, your waiter, waitress, it is required.
So fast food restaurants, where there are some, and there are some competing chains, I don't want to mention their names, but one, you go in and there's no tip option at all, right? There might be a jar even. And others, they flip it around, and once again, and there's pressure to tip.
Yes, and I don't think it's good manners to shame people into tipping either. I don't think that's the right, we have to be respectful of each other. Again, if you feel that you can be generous and you want to reward that person, or give them some appreciation, that's fine. But it shouldn't be that you feel like you're shamed into it, or you're going to have like a guilt trip tip. Something like that. You don't want that either.
Do you think the fast food chains are shaming people into tipping when they do this?
I don't know that they're shaming. I don't think that's the intention. I think hopefully the intention is to help their employees, and that's what I would hope. That's why it's set up that way. But I don't think that you should feel shameful or that you're agitated or irritated. If you want to, if you want to present that tip, then that's great. But it's not a requirement.
Where's this coming from? Because there does seem to be a proliferation in the tipping culture. in places where you used to not tip?
I think it came from COVID. I think, and it just remained. And I don't know if it's ever going to go back or not, but I think right now there is definitely tip fatigue.
Are there, well, the ways around it, I guess you don't have to, but you can also leave a cash tip if you want?
Right. I was going to say you can carry some ones with your 5s, and that could be for your week. And you can, it's instead of using that, if you want to turn the iPad back around and just put some cash in, that's acceptable, and it's also appreciated.
Let's talk a little bit about restaurants, waiters and waitresses. Obviously, you tip them. Is there a minimum that's acceptable, or is that changing?
Well, the standard is 20%, but there's a sliding scale too. If you had exceptional service, you might want to give a little bit more. If it wasn't that great, or you didn't have a good experience with that server, you might tip a little bit less. That's personal and up to you. But again, you have to remember too, if it was a kitchen issue and the meal came and it was cold, that's not on the server per se. It could be someone else involved in the chain.
What about valet parking? I know in Hartford, people park their car in at a restaurant and they go take it, and you pay $10 for that, and then do you tip on that?
Typically, yeah, $1 or $2. If you feel that that's something that is important to you. But again, it's personal. But yeah, tipping for valet, yes.
Have you noticed any tipping in certain industries or businesses where we didn't have it before?
We didn't have it before.
I know people have always tipped their barbers and their hairdressers and things like that.
Yeah, that's all that's typical, and that's something that we do. We understand that when we're going in for that service, we would tip our hairdresser, barber, nail person, but then there's also you can do tips at the holidays. If you want to give a little bit more support, different services that you are using.
And I know, my kids are teenagers now, but there were some parents who like to be called by their first names, others by Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so. What's acceptable?
I always tell kids that you have to listen to what your parents tell you. Some kids do call their parents' friends by their first names, and if that's the rule of the parent, then that supersedes what I would say to them. But again, times are changing. It's being respectful of that person, and they're not not treating them as your friend, but as you're an adult in your life.
Some really enlightening information. If they want to learn more about you and some etiquette advice, what should they do?
They can reach me at morethanmanners.com, or they can call me. All the information is on the website.
Good enough. Yeah. Michele Oricoli, this was fascinating. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dennis. Thank you.
Still ahead, more on a star UConn men's basketball player visiting his old school, and he had an inspiring message to share with students.